Hello and a very warm welcome to Cultural Communication Confidence with me, Victoria Reynoldson, and a warm welcome to episode 25. I can't even believe we're at episode 25 already. And today's topic is listening is a radical decision. Now, I deliberately chose quite a perhaps controversial title to this particular episode because often people talk about listening, but they're getting mixed up with hearing. And let me ask you a question. Did you learn to listen at school? Probably not. In fact, I think many people were told to be quiet and listen well, but not actually taught how to listen. Now, I know that I have talked about this topic on LinkedIn and various other social media places and had a lot of comments around this. So I thought it was about time that I recorded an episode all about this idea of listening, the idea that it is a radical decision, and how to improve our listening skills. It is difficult though. And I do know that in a busy world, when we're trying to do lots of different things at the same time, maybe multitasking, the idea of listening, really focusing on what somebody is saying, can be quite challenging. It's interesting, though, to really note this idea of communication, which is broadly what I talk about here in this podcast. Communication isn't just about speaking and speaking well. In fact, communication at its foundation is two-way. There is speaking and there is listening. When I was doing some research for this particular episode, what I found particularly interesting was that I found a statistic that said that the best salespeople spend 60 to 70% of their time listening. And that fascinated me because that is a profession which people often associate with speaking well. There's also a really fantastic quote by Stephen Covey. Now, I'm going to read this to make sure I get it right. The biggest communication problem is we do not listen to understand, we listen to reply. And that is very true. Sometimes we're just waiting for the other person to finish so we can jump in with our own opinions and views. So if we are going to develop our listening skills, how do we do this well? How do we develop active listening, which is so often talked about? Well, I'm going to be sharing my own approach to listening and developing those skills and taking you through this step by step. So listen in, enjoy this particular episode, and make sure you might want to make some notes just in case there are some particular tips that you think are helpful. So the first point is that hearing is different from listening. We're often hearing mode, not necessarily active listening mode. So we actually have to make that radical decision I mentioned in the title of today's episode to really pay attention. We have to really turn off the distractions, close down the tabs, maybe put everything on silent and turn off the tech. We have to decide that we really want to be there. And we therefore need to next create a pause. And that pause might be about putting time in your diary and thinking about the best place to have this conversation. Now, you will know what type of conversation this person wants to have with you and the type of topic and what that might need. But often in a professional setting, we think about listening as happening with people around a table or two people across a table facing each other. Creating a pause to listen, however, might not be about actually visually seeing the other person. It might be in some situations, particularly if they're more difficult conversations or there might be a tricky situation, to actually think about positioning yourself side by side. So have you noticed how you listen well when you're walking next to somebody, or perhaps even in a car driving as the driver or the passenger? So think about this, get creative with what does making a pause to listen well look like for you. Once you've done that, then you need to start with your intent. And what I want you to really consider is, how do you demonstrate to the other person that you're listening well? If you are seeing each other, how do you demonstrate with your nonverbal communication that you are paying attention? Now, that could be about the way you sit. It could be about what you're doing with your hands, with your head, how you're moving your head, maybe nodding. But really consider this, because this is something other people pick up on, and they're more likely to be open and also to really feel respected when you demonstrate that you're listening. And by the way, nonverbal communication is a big topic, and it's something that I talked about in a recent episode. So feel free, I'm going to check my notes. That's right, episode 22. So I'll put a link to the show notes in the show notes below if you want to go back and listen to that episode. So once you've shown your intent, then I'm going to ask you to do something which is quite challenging. Suspend your judgment and assumptions. When we know the other person, we often go into the conversation with some sense of what it is they're going to say. We also might assume already what the answer is or what they're looking for from you. And actually, that's not really listening. That's already jumping ahead in the conversation. So I invite you to really think about this. How do you put aside your judgments, your assumptions about this person and what they're going to say? Alongside this, it's quite important to take a listening approach which is intelligent, using cultural values. Now, I'm very passionate about this idea where communication meets culture. And if you're new to this podcast, you'll hear me talking actually quite soon in future episodes about cultural values and what they mean. But very simply, cultural values are our preferences. They tell us and give us insights into how people prefer to communicate, be communicated with, and interact with others, depending on their cultural background and where they're from around the world. Now, the reason why this is particularly important for listening is you need to know a little bit about the type of communicator the other person is. So when you're listening in, are they being quite direct with you? Do you think they're a direct communicator? In which case, when you're listening, it's important to pay attention to their words. They are telling you exactly what they think through what they say. If you're listening to somebody who comes from a culture where it's more usual to have a more indirect communication style, or perhaps you suspect that is the case, then actually it's not just about the words that are being said. In fact, you need to pay attention to what is not being said. Also, notice, where are the pauses and the silences? What could they mean about their real feelings? And again, nonverbal communication comes up again. Really pay attention to their nonverbal communication and notice if there is any misalignment, because again, that could be an indication of what's really going on for them. So listening intelligently with cultural values can be incredibly helpful. Now, when they pause, we have to realize the person speaking may not be finished. Now, this is quite hard. I know this myself. When somebody finishes speaking, I am thinking about, okay, what next? But the reality is people communicate and express themselves in different ways. So when people pause, actually, they may be still processing, thinking about what they want to say next, particularly if they're speaking working in a language which isn't their first language. They may need to be formulating how best to say what they want to say. So really consider this about the pause and allow that space and silence for them to continue. And if they don't, why not check in? Ask them, is there anything else you want to add? Or invite them to tell you more about a particular point. Once you're absolutely sure that they're finished, then that's where you can come in with your own view. Well, actually, I'm saying your own view. I think the next stage really is about asking good quality questions. So what that's about is making sure that you clarify, you confirm, you understand what's going on. So really do ask those questions and check in that you've got the right understanding of what they're trying to say. The final point, which I think is a really interesting one because it's one that we don't often do, is to ask them what kind of conversation they want to have next. Now, many of us assume when somebody wants to be listened to that they're looking for input. They're looking for a point of view or ideas to build on what they're doing. But there's also a third way, which is potentially this person finds it easiest to process what they're thinking and to develop their thinking by literally thinking out loud. So actually, they may have already found their own solutions without any further input from you. So really do ask yourself this question and ask them, in fact, what do you need from me next? What are you looking for now that I've listened to you and heard everything you've got to say? So let me ask you, when have you been listened to really well? And what did you notice that person doing? How could you improve your own listening skills? And what particular steps that I've shared here today resonate with you and you think you could put into practice? And you will put into practice coming out of this episode. I would absolutely love to know. So please feel free to come over to LinkedIn and connect with me over there, message me over there. I often get people sending me messages and letting me know what their own experiences are after listening to these episodes, or letting me know what particularly worked for them. And that's really good to know. So come and join the conversation. Message me over in LinkedIn. My personal profile is Victoria Reynoldson. And if you have listened to this episode today and listened well, and you have felt that maybe listening skills are an area that you yourself, or perhaps even the team that you're leading or managing, could improve on, both for internal working and really importantly for working externally, then why not come and have a chat with me about my communication, coaching and training programs and understand what we could do for you. So really happy to have a chat around that. And then finally, as we've come to the end of this episode, if you have enjoyed this and found value in this episode, I would absolutely love it if you could share it with a friend, a colleague, a co-worker, somebody in your network, and really share that with them as well. I'm very passionate about getting this podcast out into the world and sharing it as widely as possible around the globe, really to get these insights into as many people's ears as possible. So thank you so much for listening today, and I look forward to seeing you next time on Cultural Communication Confidence.